want to go now to the ACT and catch up with the Liberal Senator for New South Wales, Jim Molan. Good to talk to you again, Jim. Tell us, first up, your thoughts of Richard Marles being sworn in as Defence Minister. You would have been very worried about what we heard about him and secret meetings with Chinese leaders in the lead up to the election. Well, now he's the chief person when it comes to the nation's defence.
Yes, I was worried during the campaign, Chris, quite worried that that he was much too open in relation to China. And that he didn't perform as well as we deserve within the defence portfolio. I think to myself, today is really their first day in business, all sworn in. I am hopeful that moving defence to the deputy leader may be able to give defence some greater visibility within government. That's a hope. That's a hope. So I can't. There's no direct correlation. They could put it into the leaders' portfolio if they wanted to, and still ignore it, and did what they did during the Rudd-Gillard years. I am very, very keen to continue to move away from this bipartisan crap that we've been talking about for years and years and years. The only thing we had with a bipartisan approach to defence over many, many years now, and we moved away from it under Morrison and Dutton. The only thing we got out of that was an agreement from both sides of Parliament not to talk about defence, not to fund it adequately, and we've got to move away from that. And as I say, we did it by putting an extra $270 billion into it. We've got to start with a strategy, and Richard Marles really needs to stop and think. I would beg him not to give that strategy to the Department of Defence and say, come back in a year's time, we'll stop everything that's going on now, and come back in a year's time and tell the government what to do. He has got to come up with a strategy, and that strategy really has got to ensure that we know what war we are preparing for, and that and that national security, Chris, is much more than just defence. And the last thing I'd say, Chris, is that we do not want to fail. We don't want to have a reckoning when we fail in a war, as Ukraine has just managed not to do.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at what Richard Marles said today about China when it was put to him that China was our greatest threat.
Is China our biggest threat?
I think China has sought to shape the world around it under President Xi in a way that we have never seen before. And that presents enormous challenges for us.
So is that our biggest security threat?
Oh, well, I think it is certainly our biggest security anxiety, and it is why our strategic circumstances are so complex.
Richard Marles there talking to Pete Stefanovic this morning. What's wrong with saying China is a threat? It's now our greatest security anxiety. Earlier in the program, I showed that Richard Marles was sort of criticising the former government for chest thumping over China. He really ought to be trying for continuity, oughtn't he, now that he's got the responsibility, not suggesting to Beijing that suddenly we're have a kinder, gentler disposition towards them.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And that's a worrying statement as far as I'm concerned. You just look at the facts out of China. The largest army, Coast Guard, Navy, the rocket force, threats against Taiwan, the intimidation that they conduct on almost a daily basis, Chris, actions in Hong Kong, South China Seas. We can go through the full litany of why China is a threat to us. Richard Marles would be much more advised not to say much at all till he has finished his full briefings, if he has not finished them yet, finished his full briefings, and until he comes up with an overall strategy which is going to be backed by his own government. We could have as good a defence minister in this Labor government as ever we've had, which is a low bar to set. And yet if the rest of the government doesn't back it, and we only have the historical record, and the historical record of the Rudd-Gillard years, they said all of these comforting things. That record is not good, Chris.
Well, as for instance, my colleague at the Australian, Greg Sheridan, has constantly pointed out, our record as a nation over governments of both stripes for the last 2 decades has left a lot to be desired. Now, admittedly, you tried to catch up last term with the historic AUKUS agreement, but we're left with a capability gap at the moment, aren't we? Certainly when it comes to submarines, but also with a lot of other defence hardware. Labor faces a massive challenge to try and get the right hardware in place quickly enough.
That's exactly right. We can look at absolutely every individual thing. We can say to people, what would you do if you happened to be Defence Minister for the day? And everyone will come up with a different view. Someone will want mobilisation, someone will want a national service, someone will want more submarines. You've got to start off with a strategy, an overall strategy that looks at fuel, that looks at pharmaceuticals, that looks at our ability to feed ourselves. They're just as important as guns and tanks and ships and planes. But let's start off with the problem. The problem is that we have a one-shot defence force, and we did our best to overcome this. We have a one-shot defence force, good for 2 or 3 days, which lacks lethality, sustainability, and it lacks mass. We've got to overcome that, and we've got to overcome that in this term of government. That's going to be the challenge.
So who's going to be the spokesperson for defence issues or the shadow defence minister from here on in? Presumably you've put your hand up for that. Jim Molan, perhaps Andrew Hastie would have a stake on the club, on the job too, given that he was assistant minister.
Well, absolutely. And Andrew's got great experience in all of this, and we need a spokesman in the lower and in the upper house, but we are not short of experience. We've got, in the Senate alone, we've got 2 senators who have been ministers. And we have we have a fabulous number and quality of experienced veterans within the elected members of the coalition who can give us advice. And it's not just, you don't have to be as I've proved over the last 4 years, you don't have to be a minister to influence, and that's what we need to do, influence ourselves initially, know where we want to go, and then Peter Dutton chooses his ministry, his shadow ministry.
Great to talk to you again, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.